If it was up to me, this man right here, yes, this man, James Gunn, would be President of the United States of America. There are few people who can run a country, but I think there are even fewer who understand superhero characters as well as James Gunn. Since January 2023, the only thing that has been consistently getting me out of bed in the morning is the slate of projects that James Gunn announced for the rebooted DC universe. I think at this point it's fair to say that the first attempt at a DC interconnected universe was a failure. They certainly did not have a well thought out plan, and they most certainly did not understand these characters. They didn't understand Clark Kent, they didn't understand Superman, and they certainly didn't understand what no guns and no fucking killing meant. They didn't appreciate their side characters, and as a result, there was no heart or soul in any of these projects. But now, enter James Gunn, the man who carries my entire psychological well-being in the palm of his hand. But when I see shit like this, it makes me trust so much in this man, because he has such a deep love for these characters, and it is love that you feel in each and every one of his projects. The man loves making movies, and he loves making characters that the audience cares about. And as someone who not only cares about Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, Jon Stewart's Green Lantern, Wally West Flash, but also Dr. Fate, Black Canary, Green Arrow, Captain Atom, and even Vigilante, man. I am so excited for what this universe has to offer in terms of the stories it's going to tell and the characters we get to grow with. I could talk about projects that I want to see in this universe all day. Like, I would sacrifice any one of my living relatives to see Paul Muad'Dib Atreides suit up as Bloodhaven's Nightwing. I could talk about how I want to see a detective thriller show starring The Question, or I could talk about how I want to learn more about Lobo going on space adventures with him. I'm not going to pretend like I know where James Gunn is going with his universe, but I think there's one way that they can end this saga that would be fantastic. And if you haven't seen the animated Justice League series from the early 2000s, go watch it, come back, so I don't spoil this for you. Starcrossed Part 1, Starcrossed Part 2, and Starcrossed Part 3 is the 3-part series finale to the Justice League animated show, and it's probably my favorite piece of superhero content that I've ever seen personally. The plot of the 3-episode finale revolves around the Justice League finding out Hawkgirl's backstory and how that presents a new threat to the League itself, as well as Earth. Now, if this was adapted to live action, there would certainly be some alterations that would need to be made to the story, to how it's carried out, because this was adapted for a TV show literally for 8-year-olds. But the storytelling, the character work, and the action is all top-notch, and the plot is as follows. The episode opens up with a large spaceship attacking Washington, D.C., as well as the Justice League, as they strive to protect their home turf. And it just so happens that Hawkgirl is the only one who knows anything about the alien invading craft. Then that shit gets shot out of the sky by an even larger spacecraft, which sends down a small pod carrying its occupants. The Justice League waits anxiously as we are then introduced to Commander Ro Talik of Thanagar, Hawkgirl's homeworld. Hawkgirl immediately recognizes him, and he asks her if he can speak to the world leaders immediately regarding what just happened. We get a lot of exposition as he talks with the world leaders. He reveals that Sha'ir Hall, aka Hawkgirl, has been a spy for Thanagar for the last 5 years to examine Earth's defenses, and the ship they just shot down was a Gordanian ship. Gordanians are the mortal enemies of Thanagarians, and they've been at war for centuries. He tells the world leaders that the Gordanians are headed for Earth, and that their only hope is to allow the Thanagarians to assist them in stopping the invasion. Meanwhile, the Justice League feels heavily betrayed by Hawkgirl, especially Jon Stewart's Green Lantern, who was romantically involved with her. While the Justice League assists the Thanagarians in building their fusion reactor MacGuffin thingy, Batman is doing some investigating with the dead Gordanian that was aboard the ship that was shot down, and realizes that it was frozen, that it was dead before it was even shot down, and he believes that the Thanagarians are setting them up. With the Justice League onto their double cross, the Thanagarians take them prisoner, using the specialized weaknesses that Hawkgirl exploited and revealed to the Thanagarians so they could take down the Justice League. Without the help of Hawkgirl now, the Justice League, they're able to escape captivity, and then they decide that they must go undercover as their aliases, Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, Wally West, so on and so forth, in order to sneak around with the Thanagarians, putting Earth under martial law. With the Justice League now as fugitives, Bruce and Diana get to make out in order to keep up the ruse that they are just ordinary citizens and not a part of the Justice League. It is at this point we find out the true nature of the Thanagarians' plans as Rotalic reveals to Hawkgirl that what they actually plan to do is use Earth for what they call the hyperspace bypass or some shit like that. And what's ultimately going to happen is it's going to help them cut off the Gordanians to beat them in battle, but it will ultimately destroy Earth. Hawkgirl morally objects to this as she was lied to. She thought her mission was ultimately going to end up helping Earth, but she is not okay with this, and she decides she's going to help the Justice League. The heroes and their civvies show up at the Batcave where they can reconvene and figure out a game plan on how they're going to take down the Thanagarians. This is where Hawkgirl shows up and she reveals the true nature of the Thanagarians' plan, and to this day, I still have no idea how she found the fucking Batcave. But 8-year-olds don't think that hard about that shit, so it doesn't really matter for this. Hawkgirl is caught by the Thanagarians and she is imprisoned as a traitor, and then the Justice League uses the new information that they have found out from Hawkgirl, and ultimately deciding that they're going to retake the Watchtower, which the Thanagarians have taken control of, and they need to shut down the force field that is encompassing the fusion generator, whatever. And then Batman's plan is ultimately that he's going to crash the Watchtower into the generator, destroying it, and ending the Thanagarian reign. And there's some great action at the end as Superman and Wonder Woman battle the Thanagarians aboard their ship, while Shire and Jon Stewart fight Rotalic in order to shut down the force field. And then Batman, Martian Manhunter, and Flash battle the Thanagarians on the Watchtower. Ultimately, that was a pretty quick plot synopsis on those 3 episodes, and roughly an outline for the plot this movie could follow. But what I want to focus on is why this is my dream finale for the DCU for the Justice League. I think it's fair to assume this cinematic universe will follow at least a similar structure to the MCU, where there will be solo films and then early team-ups before one ultimate team-up versus the big bad. For this ultimate team-up finale, the villain could just as well be Brainiac, Vandal Savage, or of course Darkseid. But what I love about this story in particular is how personal it is to the Justice League. This story involves the betrayal of one of their own, hurting them on a deep emotional level and not just on a physical one, as these other villains are more capable of. In these episodes, there are so many great character moments, as one of my personal favorites is as Batman is about to crash the Watchtower into the generator, Superman flies in from out of nowhere and rips Batman from his seat in the tower as he's passed out, dripping sweat. The Watchtower ultimately crashes into the generator, destroying the structure. And as Batman and Superman watch the explosion in the distance, Superman says to Batman, "You always have to be the hero, huh?" Batman smiles, right back at you. And this is such a beautiful, emotional moment for Batman and Superman's relationship, and I think this is something that can be organically built up to throughout this cinematic universe process. Batman, he never really seemed like the one to make the ultimate sacrifice for people outside of Gotham. But when it came down to it, he planned on doing it, and of course, classic Superman, he was never going to let his friend die, so I just absolutely love that part. There's another moment that I love earlier in the episodes between Shire and Ro, after Ro has unveiled the plans, the true nature of their plans. Shire is objecting to this, and what Ro does is he removes his mask and he reveals these hideous scars that he has. And he screams at her, and he asks her if she forgot all the time he spent in Gordanian prison camps and the suffering that he had to endure during that time. And I think it's very poetic that Ro is content with destroying humanity, though the reason he's okay with doing it is for such a human reason. It's not necessarily that he wants revenge, but he wants to feel like his suffering was worth something. Like all the hurt that he experienced at the hands of the Gordanians can be used for something, and it wasn't all for nothing. And that is what makes him a great villain, I think. Now, of course, other characters like Flash, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, etc. are given great moments too in these episodes that reflect the heart and motivations of their characters. But obviously, this is the most important episode in the show for Hawkgirl. Her internal conflict is interesting because it's the clash of being caught between duty to her homeworld and the emotion and the love that she feels for her friends in the Justice League, caught between her superiors and her newfound humanity. And clearly she chooses right by standing up to and fighting Hero, and she doesn't end up sacrificing the billions of human lives. I think it's so cool that she comes to Earth as a warrior, a soldier, a spy, and she ends up shedding all that for the sake of her newfound humanity that she develops while a part of the Justice League. I love this story just in general because it brings such a human element to all of our characters. By the end, Shire is caught in this horrible spot where she's full of self-hatred and self-loathing because everyone on Earth hates her, but everyone on Thanagar hates her. And that sense of not belonging to something is a theme that I think many can relate to. Or maybe you relate more to the selflessness of Batman, the idea of wanting to die for your friends. Or perhaps it's more like you to have the loving care that Superman has, and you want to save your friends. Or maybe you resonate most with the resiliency of Green Lantern, where you feel like you have to fight to win back your one true love. Perhaps Darkseid is the more prominent physical threat over the Thanagarians, or Brainiac a more intellectual one. But in a DC landscape full of unrelatable gods and savages, a story that highlights the humanity of our heroes would be appreciated. I would gladly welcome that. I don't know how this would play out in live action or how it fits into the greater scope of a cinematic universe, so instead I'm going to leave you with this quote from esteemed comic author Grant Morrison. He says, "In a secular, scientific, rational culture lacking in any convincing spiritual leadership, superhero stories speak loudly and boldly about our greatest fears, deepest longings, and highest aspirations. They're not afraid to be hopeful, not embarrassed to be optimistic, and utterly fearless in the dark. They're about as far from social realism as you can get, but the best superhero stories deal directly with the mythic elements of human experience."